that have in front of them an economic transition, one of the biggest challenges is the capacity to do the work that you need to do. That work being the planning, the execution of grants, and even the ability to go after the many federal opportunities that are existing today across the interagency working group and our 12 agencies. And so this webinar series is really exciting because we're focusing in on those specific areas that our agencies have at their fingertips, the ability to provide technical assistance directly to and hand in hand with communities and community partners. And so today, I'm going to hand it over shortly to Briggs White, who's our Deputy Executive Director of the IWG and a colleague of mine at the National Energy Technology Laboratory. And then, as I've mentioned, the EPA, Department of Energy, and the Department of Transportation and HUD technical assistance spotlights. They're the real stars of the show today. So I'm going to hand it over very quickly now to Briggs White, the Deputy Executive Director of the Energy Communities Interagency Working Group. And Briggs, thank you, and thanks to our partner agencies for putting this together. So Briggs, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brian, and thanks for folks joining in on this second in a three-part series here. Why don't we go to the next slide, please? Just a few housekeeping reminders. We'll keep you all on mute, but really encourage you to put questions, comments in the chat. If you think of something while a speaker is presenting, just go ahead and put it into the chat. We'll hold on to those questions and we'll come back to them in a Q&A session at the end. We've got time set aside specifically to address your questions. As a reminder, this is being recorded, and we will put both the slides and the recording out on the website and send that to you in an email format, so you'll have that in your inbox when that becomes available shortly. Let's go to the next slide. Already covered that piece, so let's just keep going. All right, so just a brief reminder, the clearinghouse is where both the small pieces of money are, the technical assistance, and the big pieces of money, so those large grants, and as of lately, also the tax credits, loans, etc., given the Inflation Reduction Act. There's really three different kinds of money that are available. One is the competitive dollar, so those are the grants or the loans that maybe you go after through an RFP or a funding opportunity announcement. We have the funding that goes through an intermediary like the state, typically in a formula block grant, and otherwise through an intermediary, and you can compete for that or access that. And then finally, tax credits. Here you see some stats in the clearinghouse right now, around $200 billion worth of competitive funding, almost $300 billion of funding going through the states. And on top of that, 17 Inflation Reduction Act funded tax credits that are available to support a wide range of activities that you as communities and workers can go access and drive to the future that you want to enable. Let's go to the next slide. So just for a brief overview, we're going to play a quick video that'll just show you a little bit about how to navigate through that clearinghouse. And why don't we go ahead and get that started?
Welcome. This video is going to teach you how to find and access federal funding opportunities to support energy communities and workers. This easy-to-use, centralized clearinghouse is a targeted resource to help find information on federal assistance and direct users to federal websites for additional information. Getting started is easy. There are multiple ways to access the clearinghouse. energycommunities.gov, energycommunities.gov/funding, or search Energy Communities Clearinghouse on your preferred web browser. When you land on energycommunities.gov, one of the first things you will see is a large yellow button inviting you to explore Funding Clearinghouse. Click this to access the database. If you access the clearinghouse by visiting energycommunities.gov/funding, that will take you directly to the database. The database is where you will find hundreds of grants, loans, and other funding opportunities. You can filter by eligibility, program purpose, and by the type of funding you seek. You can even filter by opportunities that are closed, open, or those that are planned to open soon. Once you find an opportunity that's right for you, simply click the hyperlink. The next page provides you with key information to help in submitting your application, open and close date, detailed description of the opportunity, eligible recipients, amount limits per applicant, a contact for questions and concerns, and much more. Click Go to Application to learn how to apply. Most funding opportunities will have more detailed information on the application page. Read and follow that information closely. Remember that you can always reach out with questions to the contact listed on the opportunity. It's that easy to find and access funding opportunities. Let's do that one more time. This time we will sort by opportunities that are currently open and that are grant no match. Here we see more details on the program, including its open and close date, eligible recipients, program purpose, and more. Again, much more detail is found on the application page. Be sure to read everything available before applying. Oh, and one more thing. Energy communities now have access to funding opportunities, including those available through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. These investments include support for environmental remediation, infrastructure, clean energy, and much more. Information on planned investments can also be found in the clearinghouse. As these plans turn into specific funding opportunities, the clearinghouse is updated with additional details. New funding opportunities are made available frequently. Always check back for new funding opportunities to help revitalize America's energy communities. Hopefully, this demonstration on how to access federal funding opportunities for energy communities was helpful. Please stay in touch with the Interagency Working Group on Coal and Power Plant Communities and Economic Revitalization by finding us online. You can also stay up to date by signing up for update emails straight to your inbox or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
All right, so now let's get to what we came here to talk about, technical assistance. As a reminder, technical assistance usually isn't funding, it is support and consulting and help with a variety of things from building capacity to community planning, economic development planning, and much more, which ultimately can allow for better access to federal resources, of course, but also other resources, and really unlock the potential of wherever a community wants to go with their next steps. And so today, we're really excited to share with you a handful of different technical assistance opportunities. Some of these are newer, like the Thriving Communities series. Some, like Brownfield's, been around for a while and have really shown to be very useful for communities. So I'll go ahead and just do a brief introduction and we'll jump right into it. So first up, we'll have Bruce Bender, a Senior Associate Director for Grants Competition with EPA. He's going to talk about the EPA DOE Thriving Communities Partnership. Then we'll have Sahar Rana, who will talk about the Brownfields Technical Assistance Program. Then we'll talk about EPA's Water Infrastructure Technical Assistance Program. Lots of money available for water. How can we unlock that with a little bit of TA? And then last but not least, we'll have Maria Zimmerman from DOT, who will be talking about the DOT HUD partnership called Thriving Communities. So really excited to share that with you. And let's go ahead and hand it over to Bruce to kick us off here.
Well, thank you. I'm excited about discussing
Ellen, if you're ready to go, why don't we move on to our next speaker?
Sure thing.
Hi,
Oh, I was gonna say I'm after the brownfields, but I
I can start with the brownfield if you want.
perfect.
Okay, yeah, maybe Ms. Sahar, why don't we do the brownfields?
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm Sahar Rana, and I'm a technical assistance lead in the Office of Brownfields and Land Revitalization in the EPA headquarters in Washington, D.C. Today, I'll just give you the overview on the range of our technical assistance and how communities can access them. Next slide, please. So our program provides a variety of technical assistance to communities to help them with their brownfields challenges. These TAs are offered via third-party providers, EPA contractors, and to 128A recipients who assist communities. Our third-party providers are technical assistance to brownfield communities known as TAP providers and topic-specific providers who are competitively selected and are an independent resource. Communities can access these TA providers directly, and these technical assistance is available at TA providers' discretion. Then we have EPA contractors who assist communities through targeted brownfield assistance or through land revitalization and regionally directed technical assistance. Communities can access these resources through EPA regional offices, and TA is available at regions' discretions. Then we have TA for Section 128A recipients. It is a state and tribal resource that is provided to 128A recipients via grants and must assist small communities, tribes, rural or disadvantaged areas. And these technical assistance is free of charge to the communities. Next slide, please. So I'll quickly go over what these different type of TA are. So the technical assistance to brownfield communities, also known as TAB, is designed to provide technical assistance to communities and stakeholders to help them address their brownfield sites and to increase their understanding and involvement in brownfields cleanup, revitalization, and reuse. TAB providers serve as an independent resource and can provide expert technical assistance and guidance to help communities, among other things, understand acquiring, assessing, cleaning up, and redeveloping brownfields properties, the health impacts of brownfield sites, how science and technologies are used for site assessment, remediation, redevelopment, and reuse, and how to comply with voluntary cleanup requirements. Next slide, please. Now, in addition to TAB, our various third-party providers provide topic-specific TA to communities nationwide. Our TA to tribes assist U.S. federally recognized tribes in support of tribal response program brownfields efforts. Our national technical assistance providers help communities integrate environmental justice and equitable development principles into brownfields assessment, cleanup, and reuse, offer and promote educational opportunities, partnerships, and training programs related to brownfields cleanup and redevelopment, and develop and host the National Brownfields Training Conference. This year, we will have additional TA to communities via providers in 5 subject areas to help address new brownfield-related challenges. These 5 focus areas include support to existing and prospective brownfields RLF guarantees, nonprofits seeking to address and reuse brownfields, and local government leaders, and for the research opportunities to minimize displacement and gentrifications resulting from brownfields, and land bank strategies as tools for brownfield revitalization. Next slide, please. Now, moving on technical assistance via EPA contractors. First is the TBA, which is Targeted Brownfield Assessments. Services under TBA include site assessment, cleanup option and cost estimate, and community outreach. EPA contractors conduct TBA on behalf of an eligible entity. TBAs are best suited for smaller projects with time constraints to enable the projects to move forward in the redevelopment or reuse process. Next slide, please. Site planning and research consulting services to communities via EPA regional directed and land revitalization technical assistance are designed to help communities identify practical, safe reuse options and approaches that support local goals through access to site planning, design, and finance expertise. Next slide, please. So LRTA is available to explore, develop, and advance innovative approaches to assist communities in sustainable reuse of contaminated or potentially contaminated properties. Next slide, please. And our regionally directed technical assistant provides direct support for community visioning, site design, market studies, and other feasibility studies, and provide direct support to communities for project funding and financing. Next slide, please. So our TA to 128A recipient assists small communities, tribes, rural or disadvantaged area to carry out technical assistance activities that are outlined in CERCLA section 104K7. And the type of activities include compiling an inventory of brownfields, facilitating community involvement in a brownfield project, providing brownfields training, providing TA to a community that is new to brownfields, and performing community visioning or market analysis. These are just some of the examples. And next slide, please. Now, more on our LR side of our house, EPA continues to support innovative approaches that will help move contaminated sites into reuse. We help communities explore how to identify and remove barrier to site reuse, integrate sustainable and equitable approaches into site redevelopment, and attract and leverage other resources. So the land revitalization part of our program ensures that reuse consideration are integrated into all of EPA cleanup decisions, including cleanup affecting brownfield, underground storage tanks, and Superfund redevelopment. And revitalization, land revitalization puts previously contaminated properties back into a productive use. Next slide, please. Now, towards the end, I'd like to mention that we can fund TA activities that help to determine safe brownfield site reuse, decide cleanup, and etc. However, we cannot fund activities unrelated to advancing cleanup and reuse of brownfield sites within the project area, or activities such as marketing, taking surveys, etc. Next slide, please. So that now that you learned about all the technical assistance that is available, so next step would be, depending on your community TA needs for the potential project, you can contact your EPA regional offices or technical assistance providers to help you get started on your brownfields redevelopment and reuse process. There are links that are in the chat that you can see to know more about technical assistance that is available to the communities, and also who to contact to have access to these TAs. And if you need brownfield grant funding for multiple properties or cleanup, we're going to have a grant availability open again in fall 2023. Please look at the solicitation page to see what are the opportunities that are open now. And thank you so much for joining us to learn more about technical assistance.
Hey, that was great. And I would encourage folks to please do put questions, comments in the chat as we go along. Why don't we go to Ellen next with the EPA water program and keep it going.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having us on the call. I'm really excited to talk about some of the opportunities that we have for folks to access funding to help them with their water infrastructure projects. My name is Ellen Tarquinio, and I'm the director for the Water Infrastructure and Resiliency Finance Center here at EPA. And among the many things that we do is to run the technical assistance program. And you know, as it was said at the kickoff of this meeting, there's a lot of money that's available for water infrastructure, more than we've ever had before, to the tunes of many billions of dollars. And this technical assistance is really geared to help communities access that funding. You can see here on this slide, I've got, changing the odd for communities, because we are really laser focused on helping to provide that technical assistance to communities that haven't received any of the funding that we have for the state revolving fund, which is how we administer a lot of that funding for water infrastructure projects. We're really focused on disadvantaged communities, tribal communities, rural communities, that really trying to have them get their fair share of all of this money that's out there through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. So you go to the next slide. Just like, we heard from the Brownfields program, it's a similar approach that we have for the water technical assistance. We issue grants. There's a lot of competitive grantees who have been selected to provide this free technical assistance to communities around the country. We really are focused for that TA to provide communities help with planning some of their water infrastructure needs, looking at capital improvements, building capacity, applying for funding, and even improving the compliance. It really is a big picture of what they can do for water infrastructure projects, but really want to highlight that this is free help for communities that EPA is providing through that bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. So if you go to the next slide. Again, I mentioned it's a wide range of issues, and you can see it's, everything from what we call limited scope technical assistance. That might just be helping a community do an asset management plan for their water infrastructure projects. And it might be something really as big as doing a preliminary engineering report that they need to access that funding. This slide sort of just highlights a lot of those things that we've had communities access for. And so we're making sure that this is available as technical assistance to those communities who need it most. A lot of this work is geared towards having communities, again, get that state revolving fund money to help build their infrastructure projects. But you've heard this from the other presenters. We do view, water as sort of a keystone element to a community. And so as some of these technical assistance providers are going into communities, they're doing holistic looks at, well, what are some of the other things we can address, as well as when we're looking at the water system? Are there really community breakdowns that we need to engage different community members in, different stakeholders, to really have buy-in and to really sort of build up the community using water infrastructure as that keystone core component of that community development work. If you go to the next slide. I'm going to be going through these really quick because we've got I know a lot of different technical assistance programs to cover in a really short amount of time. So, if you've got my contact, feel free to follow up at any different point. Wanted to highlight that some of the big programs that we have going on right now, the environmental finance centers, which I'll talk a lot about, the Build America, Buy America Act requirements, which is a new thing for a lot of communities. And it's something that we're really engaged on, providing that technical assistance of how you have to comply with the BABA requirements. The Water Infrastructure and Resiliency Finance Center, which is the center that I'm the director for, we provide a lot of that technical assistance ourselves. And we've got some contractors that help in that area, and we help communities look for different funding approaches, help them walk through that system. We do a lot with regionalization efforts, a lot of stormwater funding. So we do provide that help from EPA experts as well. There's the RST program, which I'll talk about, and then there's the EPA small water capacity development grants that are available for communities, really focused on communities that are 10,000 and under, to provide assistance for their drinking water needs. If you go to the next slide, the environmental finance centers. And I really want to highlight this because this is a really great program with a lot of money that we've put into it. Really, again, supported by that bipartisan infrastructure law money, and even the IRA funds are coming into play here as well. But we have just recently announced 29 different technical assistance providers around the country that are available to help communities, to work with them directly. That's been a really big focus of the environmental finance centers. We want to not just provide a training where you've got 400 people online, but have these technical assistance providers really get to know communities, provide hands-on assistance, direct community technical assistance to walk them through project development, project funding, engineering support, anything that a community needs to really access funding for their water projects. So this is, again, very hands-on, community-specific assistance that has over $150 million to support communities around the country. You go to the next slide. And I want to just highlight, while we've got 29 different providers, it doesn't mean that 29 folks are going to be coming and knocking on communities' door. We are working with folks for some of this work is really focused on the technical assistance providers in this category are really focused on environmental justice and disadvantaged communities. So issues that communities around the country are facing, again, if they've been historically marginalized, if they have longstanding environmental justice issues, these technical assistance providers are really there to help support those communities and get them the help that they need. If you go to the next slide. These technical assistance providers, which again, is a lot of the same folks, I want to highlight that there's, regional specific technical assistance providers around the country. There's specific people who know, what are the issues that you're facing in Pennsylvania, and those are very different than North Carolina and what you'd see in New Mexico. So there's a range of folks around the country who can help get into those specific local issues, help communities deal with maybe some state specific and local specific regulations, help them work with the state entities to really access funding and build projects that are sustainable and going to benefit the community long term. Go to the next slide. And this is almost a preview. This Rural Small Tribal program is just about to come out. We're about to make this announcement in the next couple of weeks of who the selected grantees are that can really help, again, the rural, small, and tribal communities deal with the water issues that they're facing. It's also a significant amount of money. This is a separate appropriation, so I just wanted to highlight that this is coming from what we call the AWIA money. And it really is geared, again, to helping communities who really struggle with the capacity to access federal funding. Go to the next slide. The thing that I want to really highlight here is that there's 5 different priority areas. So if you're thinking about something for your communities, thinking about something that you really want to help deal with, these are the 5 areas that this grant is going to focus on providing technical assistance under. It's acquiring the financing and funding, providing protecting water quality and compliance assistance, dealing with some of the tribal specific issues, decentralized systems, and lagoons. And again, the next couple weeks, you're going to have an announcement. And for communities for this, I just saw that pop up in the chat. We are really referring to, it could be utilities, it could be communities of just a town that comes in. It's really any of the eligible entities under the state revolving fund. So they can come in and work with any of the technical assistance providers to access this support. If you go to the next slide. And, I wanted to highlight, there is a finance clearinghouse for water projects. This is a separate one. It's got a lot of the same info and a lot of the same really great layout that we just saw for the energy communities. But one, key thing here just to highlight for you all is that we also have some learning modules. So if you're a community who's thinking about, well, does this funding apply for me? Like, what does that even mean by community? There's learning modules on here that'll go through some of those definitions, some of the specifics of what the state revolving fund is, how you can get some more information before you even talk to a technical assistance provider. And it's got all of the contact if you go to that website for all of the different technical assistance providers and folks who can really help your community access federal funding for water. Then the last slide. I also provided this intake form. If you are on here and you're thinking, well, my area, my town, my city needs help with water infrastructure projects, we would love this technical assistance. I'll provide my contact in the chat as well and make sure you all have it. But feel free to email this waterta@epa.gov. This is what we're using until we get our web intake form up. I think it's going through OMB clearance right now. But if you go ahead and you send an email over to this waterta@epa.gov and say, we're looking for help, we want someone to reach out to us, we'll do some internal vetting. So we'll see, what technical assistance provider might be the best one for you. And then we'll give them your contact info and they'll follow up with you to help provide some of that support. Really quick overview of all the stuff that we're doing. And I think maybe we'll be turning it back over to Bruce.
That's right. Hey, thanks for that, Ellen. And I didn't even realize you had those TA resources, particularly on the finance side. So thanks for sharing that. That's great. All right, yeah, let's go back to Bruce. And Bruce, if you can come on, let's double check that audio and we'll bring up Bruce's slides here. Bruce, I can't hear you. Try that. No? Oh, heard you for a second. No. That's frustrating. Well, I wonder if maybe we should go on to our last speaker then.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Well, I guess the moral of this story is I need the technical assistance to work this, right? But no,
Thanks,
there
Bruce.
was a storm that passed by here about a half hour. I don't know if it did something, but okay. Well, I'm glad it all worked out. So thank you, and again, I apologize for any inconvenience. This is the program we're working on with the Department of Energy. And next slide, please. So this is something that has been in, I guess, development or thought for a long time about environmental justice and providing technical assistance, particularly to underserved communities. I've been at EPA since 1992, and I could tell you, talking about environmental justice and helping communities has been something that's been talked about for 30 years, particularly the technical assistance aspect. And I think it's only until recently that we really have all these efforts with water and with brownfields, although some of them have been doing them longer than what we're doing with the Environmental Justice Office. But this has been something that's always been a priority. When we started to launch this program, there's this, I guess, network called the Thriving Communities Network that sort of the Department of Transportation oversees. And through that, we connected with the Department of Energy, who was also interested in funding technical assistance, so they joined with this effort. And the main principle that I think we want to accomplish is we want to make the technical assistance as accessible as possible to as many entities as possible. They're not going to have to pay for this. There's not going to be an application process where you apply to get technical assistance. It's going to be available to people who need it. Next slide. So we began this competition, I believe, in August of last year. We're in the process of reviewing the applications. We got over 70 applications for the competition, which is about 3 times as many as we expected. We really didn't expect to get that many, given that this was the first time we were doing this sort of broad-based technical assistance at the agency. The efforts that Ellen and others talked about, these have been more focused to specific medium like water or brownfields and land. This was the first time we just did a generalized technical assistance program. And the whole, these centers, which they're going to be called TICTACs, which stands for Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, are intended to provide the whole range of technical assistance to what we call program participants. Those are just anybody who could get the assistance, the technical assistance. Next slide. We have approximately $100 million available for awards. 15 million was provided by Energy. We hope to make 5 to 10 awards nationwide, or even 11. What would be the best result if we did 1 per EPA region? We have 10 regions, and then 1 national center that would fill in the gaps that existed in any of the regions, and that would also try to coordinate the services among the different technical assistance centers. We're planning on 10 million per award for 5 years, and these will be cooperative agreements, so EPA and the Department of Energy can be involved in the performance and the oversight. Next slide. These are the entities who the awards will go to. These are who are eligible to apply. Universities, nonprofits, and intertribal consortia. So this is who will get the awards. Next slide. This is the list of the program participants, or it's just an examples of the types of organizations who we hope will take advantage of the technical assistance and solicit it. Just a very broad, like I said, anybody can request the technical assistance. The priority is on providing it to underserved and disadvantaged communities and entities in those communities, but it's available to anybody who's interested in learning more of how to apply for grants, how to manage grants when they get them, how to get involvement in the process of providing comments on programs, and all sorts of stuff like that. Next slide. These are some of the activities that the centers will provide. One of the main things that we want to make sure is that these centers do outreach to the widest possible audience, especially organizations in remote and rural communities, so they're aware of the services these technical assistance centers will provide. As I mentioned, providing technical assistance on proposing grants, how to manage them, how to navigate federal systems like grants.gov and sam.gov, which sometimes can be intimidating, especially to new applicants. Those are these types of things that the centers will provide. They're not going to write proposals for people. That's not the intent of it. But if people needed assistance with strengthening their proposal or wanted to have someone review it to give, hints or constructive feedback to make it stronger, that's what these centers are here to provide. Also, they're here to provide collaboration, to make connections between different communities. One of the things we're going to focus is on success stories and results, and we're also hoping that all the centers learn from each other best practices so they can improve their services as we go on during the 5-year term of the agreements. And then, as I mentioned, since the Department of Energy is involved with us, in addition to like the environmental justice activities, Energy has their terminology, which is similar, and energy justice, and those will be the focus of technical assistance also. Next slide. As I mentioned, we hope to make 11 awards, and these are what each of the regional geographic areas would be, and hopefully there'll be an award for each one of these areas, plus a nationwide one. Since we're still in the middle of reviewing proposals, we can't guarantee that because it depends on how good the proposals were for each of these regions. But the hope is, and the expectation is, that there will be at least one award per region. The next slide. These are the types of things that we think are important to operating one of these TICTAC centers. And this came up a lot during the open period when people were preparing proposals. The centers need to serve all the areas of one of those EPA regions. Like for Region 9, which is California, Hawaii, I think Arizona, it can't just be servicing California. It's the whole area of the region that entities in that whole area need to be able to get technical assistance. And that was one of the main things that we stressed during the process. The grantees need to have the capabilities and experience to run the centers. The evaluation criteria that we used during the solicitation were designed to do that. And again, we want to make these centers accessible to remote, rural, tribal participants. We don't want to make it difficult for them to access, and that's also an important aspect of the center and things that we're going to be evaluating. Hopefully, we'll be making the awards in March, and that these will be operational soon thereafter. Next slide, please. These are just the types of things that the centers will not provide, and we indicated this in the solicitation. It's not for business training. The centers are not the representative of the people who are they providing assistance to. They're to help them, but they're not their representative. They can't just get on the phone and call EPA or anybody and speak for an applicant or a community. They're to help them, but they're not their representative. And then just some of these other things are just, I think they're really general prohibitions. They're not there to provide legal advice. They're not their lawyers. They're not there to help people form businesses. So these are the types of things that we want the grantees would not be able to perform. Next slide, please. The status of things are that, as I mentioned, the application process is underway. Every application that passes what we call these threshold eligibility requirements, which are sort of some pass-fail prerequisites, they're scored by a panel. As I mentioned, we have about 70 plus applications. These were sort of the 5 evaluation criterion that are being used to evaluate the applications. How well a proposal will address the program objectives, the milestone schedule, whether the budget's reasonable. programmatic capability is really just that the centers have the staff and resources and experience to successfully provide the services. And past performance is just something where we do a competition at EPA. We look at how well an applicant has performed on prior grants and whether they perform them successfully or not. Next slide. In addition to the scoring based on the evaluation factors, at EPA, we do retain the ability to sometimes go slightly out of order if we thought a little bit lower scored proposal better met some programmatic policies and objectives. We identify that in the solicitation, and these are just the ones that we use. For this competition, I'm not sure if this is going to be really relevant. Usually the geographic diversity one is when we do a competition if, the top 10 applicants were all from Region 1 and number 11 was from Region 6. We want to pick the Region 6 one so everyone isn't in the same region. So we reserve the right to sometimes go a little bit out of order. Next slide, please. And this is just a time frame of what we're planning to do. As was mentioned earlier with the other EPA technical assistance programs, one thing that we are going to do once these awards are made and once the other awards are made is we're going to have some coordination at EPA to try to minimize the duplication of coverage and services because there's a lot of technical assistance being done. And they're going to overlap to some extent, despite the best made efforts not to do that. That's just, I think, the nature of things. So we're aware of that. And then once the awards are all made, we will try to minimize that as much as possible. Next slide.
Hey, Bruce, I think we need to bring it to a head here.
Okay, these are just some websites with information. And if you have any questions about this, feel free to give me a call or an email, and I'll put my email in the chat. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Hey, thanks, Bruce, and it'll be an exciting spring to find out who the winners are. Let's hand over the floor to Maria and learn more about what's going on at DOT and HUD.
Great, thank you. So yes, I will try to talk quickly so that we have time for some questions and answers. I just put my email in the chat, and so if there's anything I quickly talk on and you'd like to follow up in a less frenzied way, please reach out and let me know. Happy to talk with you. Next slide. So as mentioned, I'm the strategic advisor for technical assistance and community solutions at the Department of Transportation. The department has a lot of technical assistance resources. However, unlike I would say EPA, who we heard from, a lot of our technical assistance resources have traditionally focused on supporting state departments of transportation, transit agencies, other sort of transportation facility owners and operators. And so with all of the new funding created in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law Act, including many, many new discretionary grant programs that local governments and units of government, nonprofits, and others can directly apply for, we're really revamping our approach to technical assistance and standing up a number of new resources and opportunities. And so I will talk quickly through some of these different elements that you can see here, but we are doing technical assistance both through webinars, and if you're interested in any of our individual grant programs, you will see that most of those grant programs have their own specific webinars to really talk through the specifics of those notices of funding opportunity. In some instances, we are combining programs into a single NOFO to make it a little bit easier for communities to apply to, and working to simplify the language and also to give priority to those census tracts that are designated using some of our federal disadvantaged community tools to really identify areas of greatest need. Those include all tribal government entities, a majority of rural communities, in addition to many urban disadvantaged community census tracts. So let's, in the interest of time, jump to the next slide. So one of the things I wanted to spotlight that we just rolled out earlier this summer is called the DOT Navigator, and you can see the link for it there in the chat as well. This is an online resource that includes a searchable database of all of DOT's existing technical assistance resources, whether they're specific to railroads or highways or aviation, transit. So you are welcome to use this DOT Navigator both to kind of access and find out more information about specific technical assistance resources, But we also have created a number of new materials specifically to help folks applying for and responding to DOT grant opportunities, as well as to better navigate and understand the bipartisan infrastructure law. Most of DOT's technical assistance resources, unlike some of those we just heard from EPA, do not go directly to localities for TA, but by and large go to third-party providers, so a contractor or a university, other entity that would work with and provide technical assistance support. We also have, and you can access through the navigator, the contacts for Federal Highways Administration, for the Federal Transit Administration, for other DOT contacts in your state or region. And those staff really are a terrific kind of initial entry point to reach out to DOT to get more information that you might have. So let's go to the next slide, and I will show you one of the new tools that we just put on the navigator last week is something called the Discretionary Grant Preparation Checklist. And this really outlines and has a bunch of links within it of 10 kind of key essential steps as you're thinking about DOT grants that you might be interested in applying to this year. How do you really get your community ready for those? How do you navigate the process? How do you find out about match requirements and what those might be, or other requirements that we have in some of our different funding programs? And so I invite you to check out that resource and take a look at it. It also includes a link to our calendar of upcoming funding opportunities, which I'll talk about again in just a minute. But wanted to call that out as a new resource that we really tried to have be a comprehensive way to get ready, to get prepared, and to access some of the key resources and links that we have here in the department to help your community. Next slide, please. We also, late last year, published a US DOT guide on meaningful public involvement. DOT grant programs and our formula programs really do require meaningful public involvement as part of that process to identify transportation projects, to inform and engage the community through the process of developing those projects, building those projects, and operating those projects. And so this new guidance document, I just wanted to share with folks to understand some of the best practices, some of the requirements that we have in our funding program. And one of the tools that we also put up on the DOT Navigator is how you actually can fund public involvement activities in your grant proposals and using some of your formula funds to do that. We've been getting a lot of questions about, folks thinking they couldn't use transportation funds to do public involvement, that they could only use planning funds. And the answer is no, like you actually can work public involvement into your project costs and your project budget and the project set of activities happening. So I wanted to call that out. Our next slide, please. We also, some of you may know and have engaged, we have a Rural Opportunities to Use Transportation for Economic Success, our ROOTS program, or ROUTS program. And the ROOTS program is really DOT's one-stop shop for supporting rural communities. They have developed a number of webinars focused for rural communities. They've created some toolkits, including to help rural communities understand how to implement and take advantage of all of the investment in electrical vehicle charging. And they are in the process right now of updating their grant application toolkit as well. So really wanted to recommend you to connect with our ROOTS team. I know that they sit in on the intergovernmental working group as well, but they can be a great resource to connect and contact with folks here at DOT who can be an important point of contact. Next slide, please. This is showing, again, I'd mentioned we did release just last week our calendar of upcoming notices of funding opportunity. This slide here is actually from the ROOTS team that I was just mentioning, but you can see here links to those different grant funding programs. You can see when the NOFO is going to be open or is currently open and will be closing to kind of help you get ready and get prepared for that. The ROOTS team can help to identify if there's a specific rural set aside and what the definition of rural is used for and who's eligible for applying for that. So We already this year have had a number of important programs like our RAISE program, like our tribal transportation program that just closed. Others on the rail side will be having many more programs that will be coming online here over the coming months. So I encourage you to check out that calendar to see what might be coming ahead that could be of interest for you and your community to make transportation improvements. Next slide, please. And then I also wanted to mention, as Bruce had noted, we at DOT have a Thriving Communities program. We've been coordinating with Department of Housing and Urban Development, who also received some funding for a Thriving Communities program. This is our new technical assistance program that really is focused on providing comprehensive technical assistance to help communities scoping projects, developing projects for funding, developing those applications, as well as support with project delivery. And so it's a comprehensive program. We've organized it in the first year to focus on 3 different communities of practice. One specifically, the Main Streets cohort, is focused on rural and tribal communities and community revitalization projects that support those communities. We also have another cohort, the network communities, which is focused on those that are more interested in advancing freight or multimodal options. Our first year of the program, the fiscal year 2022 notice of funding opportunity is closed, and we are in the process right now of reviewing applications. We hope to be announcing those TA providers as well as the communities selected for this support early this year in spring. And we also received additional funding to continue the program for the current fiscal year FY23. DOT will be announcing that new notice of funding opportunity in early summer. So stay tuned for that. I won't say more now, just given our time limitations, but it's certainly a program we encourage you to look at. It does provide direct technical assistance to communities to help you advance transportation projects and really tailored to the needs of your community. Next slide, please. We have a number of other technical assistance programs that will be rolling out here in the coming months. One, again, is specifically focused on rural and tribal technical assistance programs. These programs are all through our Build America Bureau. We also will be having additional technical assistance. One is our regional infrastructure accelerators, and this will be the 3rd year of that program. We're funding, similar to kind of what we heard on the EPA side, goes to different regions to specifically advance a pipeline of infrastructure projects in that metropolitan region. So I should say it's not the multi-state region that we heard about from EPA, but really like thinking about the metropolitan area and the communities, or it could also be rural regions within a state that are working to advance their projects. So I invite you to check all those out. More information will be coming, and happy to work with Briggs to share that when those are available. And then I think we have the last slide. Which, as we've mentioned a little bit here in this call, we really, like you've heard us mention so many different programs already, right? And so like we're trying on the federal agency side, how can we do a better whole of government approach to connect and coordinate our technical assistance programs? Because there are many overlaps and synergies, and just like the clean energy communities that we want to be supporting you, we also have a number of other communities that we know we're aware that our programs overlap. And so how can we do a better job to make the connections on our end? So towards this goal, we have announced something called the Federal Thriving Communities Network. We have a website that currently DOT is hosting, but you can access that and you can see which of these different technical assistance programs across these different federal agencies, EPA, Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, GSA, HUD, and others, which programs we are specifically working to coordinate and which places and communities and capacity builders we're really working to leverage. So I invite you to check that out. And today is a great example of our working to do that. And hopefully you will see a lot more of this in the coming year. So I will pause there. Thank you so much, and glad to just give you a quick snapshot of what we have underway at DOT.
Maria, thank you so much, and thanks to all the panelists today. We are running short on time, and I noticed there were a number of questions that were offered in the chat. Lots of contact information, lots of web links shared in the chat. I hope that the participants were able to grab some of those. We also, if we go to the I think 2 more slides, you can always find more information at the Energy Communities website, energycommunities.gov. We have another upcoming webinar in a week on technical assistance. You can register for that webinar at energycommunities.gov as well. That's energycommunities.gov. You can see the events list. I'm going to highlight, there was one question in the chat around the original list of the IWG communities and definitions of communities. For the purposes across all of the different agencies, each agency has different eligibility requirements. In large part, all of the technical assistance that was discussed today is available to communities across the country, whether you're on the initial list to the president from the report just shy of 2 years ago or not. Just to be very clear, we have a special emphasis on communities that are undergoing transition under the IWG. And so, we're really trying to target some of our outreach efforts, but the technical assistance and many of the provisions across the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act are more broadly applicable to communities around the country. If we go to the next slide, you can follow us at energycommunities.gov. As I mentioned, do try to attend our stakeholder engagement events. We want to hear more feedback from you in the communities. And again, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and at energycommunities.gov. And so I'm sure we'll be sharing these slides for all of our participants loaded with lots of information, lots of good information, as well as the links for you to follow up with the different agencies. So with that, I'm going to close. And again, thank you so much to our partners at the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation, the Environmental Protection Agency, and HUD for today's webinar, and invite you back in a week. Thank you and have a great day.